Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Zaleski Sports Show. Jason Zaleski right here. Steve Maves right there. So it's been said, if I've said it once, I've said it a million times. Give me some time to think. We've all heard that phrase. I remember my parents saying it, mostly when they were annoyed with me. Just give me some time to think. I've said it, mainly in the same way, I suppose, during my parenting years. And other times, it's legit. Just give me some time to think, right? I'm overloaded here. I just need some time to kind of process through some thoughts. And it's a normal human response, especially when you're overloaded with who knows what. Work, family, preparing for the NFL draft, a mock draft maybe, or stressing over did my team do what I thought they were supposed to do. A lot of those Monday mornings as a Dallas Cowboy fan. But give me some time to think. Well, Steve, we are officially now 1 month past the last known sporting event here in these United States of America. You know what? There were a couple little trickles of bowling that weekend after, so maybe we're not quite a month clear, but a month for us anyway. Mm-hmm. March 12th was the last high school sporting event, April 13th today, so we are more than a month through. And what that means is we've all had a lot of time to think. And sometimes in a thinking person's world, you can overthink things. Sometimes, especially if you're given too much time to think. We put this, we're a sports show here, so we do sports-related stuff, and we see it in sports all the time. You ice the kicker, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, you give that kicker too much time to think is the strategy. Free throw shooter, a pitcher in baseball, softball, what have you. You call a timeout, third base coach comes down the line. They do some talking, but they're talking about nothing. I mean, they're probably just talking gibberish or just moving their lips, and you're causing that pitcher too much time to think. Think about that next pitch, think about that next kick, that next free throw, that next whatever it is. Now, I don't know if some high school coaches have had too much time to think, not enough time to think, just enough time to think. Everybody does things and thinks for themselves for their own reasons. It just seems to me, Steve, that we've had a lot of basketball coaches step down, resign, leave, etc. It just seems to me. Now, maybe in this sports world that we're in now, where there's not a whole lot going on, as it turns out, maybe it just seems like that because now the news updates are a little bolder. They're a little bit more prevalent. They're more available. I don't know. We'll talk about that as we had our last one happen over the weekend, and it was Edgar, girls varsity basketball coach, Betty Hermansky, and Coach Hermansky, one of the finest people in all of central Wisconsin. Had a chance to talk to Coach last night, and I told her that too. And we'll turn over to Steve here in just a moment. I know Steve's had the pleasure of talking to Coach Hermansky a couple times over the last few years. So I told Coach the story last night, and I said, no matter what, when I see you, I'm still calling you Coach. Mm-hmm. And I've said this to a number of coaches over the years, and this all started for me when I was 17 years old. A friend of mine, we'll just say Eric from Hewitt was what we'll say here for the show. He can respond later. And those of you watching this on Facebook, you got the chat box down below or the comment, whatever it is. And Eric can feel free to comment. We were 17 years old. It was, it must have been summer after high school graduation. Maybe we're 18, whatever the case. And Hewitt, a little town in Hewitt just outside of Marshfield, just east of Marshfield, still has a recreational, softball, t-ball league. A lot of towns do. They're no different. And whatever came over Eric that summer, he decided he was going to coach one of those teams. And so and these are, 10-year-old kids. And at the time, it was difficult to understand why Eric would choose to be around a bunch of little kids. Didn't seem like that kind of guy at that time. And so, anyway, he His story's gone on too long already. He coaches this team. We have a lot of fun. Mainly me and the other guys just out there laughing at him, making fun of him for coaching. We called him Coach. So we were 18 at the time, 44 now. We still call him Coach. That's his name. Yeah. And so Coach Hermansky, as I told her last night, no matter what, when I see you, it's still Coach. One of the most fantastic people, a 17-year run as the Edgar girls basketball coach. Steve, we'll let you tell your version of Coach Hermansky. And again, this is not it sounds like something else. It's not. She's got her own reasons. You can read about it at ZaleskiSports.com. But Steve Maves, Betty Hermansky, one of the finest coaches, now former coaches in the area.
Yeah, and I had, as you mentioned, had the pleasure of calling a couple of their games the last couple of years. Had one here at Assumption this past winter. And she just as humble as there can be. I mean, she talks obviously about how gracious she is about her kids and all of that, and just very, very personable to be able to talk to in an interview. When Randy Paul and I went up to Edgar for Assumption, Edgar, he went over there and he was telling me stories about Coach Hermansky and everything, and he made the point of going over there and talking to her before the game, and then he came over and was joking around with me about stuff about her. So 17 years, especially now, is a good tenure, obviously. I had the pleasure of playing with a coach that was a coach for 29 years, and so you don't get a whole lot of coaches now that stay at one school for that long. And so to have a coach at your school like Coach Hermansky for 17 years and as successful as they have been, just puts a mark on how gracious I'm sure all these kids and all these girls were to have a coach like her these last almost 2 decades.
Yeah, just about. And again, Coach Hermansky, as I will forever call her, still around, still in Edgar. Yep. Again, you can read all about it at ZaleskiSports.com. As she just said, where we are in her life, our children have grown. They've got their own kids now, so I guess that makes her Grandma Hermansky. And just family won over in that decision-making process over coaching the other kids in her life. And that's a tough decision. Yeah. There's no doubt about it. Yet, though, I believe for 99% of the population, family's going to win when you're in that decision-making process, and it won again here this time. The Edgar Girls program, that was in good shape for the next coach to be determined. I know the Edgar School Board is going to meet later this week, and one of the items they'll be talking about is their search for a girls basketball coach. So if you are one of those candidates, if you believe you are, one, you can check with me first. I can help validate that for you. Two, in either order, 1A, 1B, is to let the officials at the Edgar School District know, and perhaps you can be the next Wildcat basketball coach. I know Coach Hermansky spoke very highly of Coach Nowak, her assistant coach, mentioned that in her big reveal. I don't know what other word to put on this, but again, Betty would be laughing, and maybe she's even listening now, but she would be laughing about this too. She said the thing that she was stressed out about the most, that was most difficult, was telling Holly, her assistant, who she had grown closer with, for one, as a player when she played at Edgar, and then on the sideline. So I know they'll find a good staff there, and they've got a good core of girl basketball players already in place. A couple seniors that Coach mentioned in the interview. One of them, 1,000-point scorer, McKenna Gooden, and others. And again, all those comments at ZaleskiSports.com. All right, so I mentioned, Steve, that it seems like they're dropping like flies out here. And maybe it is. I don't know. I'll also put this out there in a now hiring bulletin. We're looking for a statistician here, because this person would be able to tell me, is this normal? Is this not? I don't have time to look up all the coaching changes from years past. We did put out a message to Paul Pabst. He works for a different radio program right now. We'll see if he'll come over to Zaleski Sports. Salary demands will be considered. Mainly, though, you get to be a statistician here if you want to work as a volunteer. All right. But we look through the list here. We'll mention them. I don't know if we're going to go through all of them here, but man. So starting in girls basketball, and again, we've had now 31 days of time to think since the last girls basketball game, since the last high school sporting event of any kind here in the state of Wisconsin. Appleton West, Berlin, Birchwood. We talked about Colby a couple weeks ago, Coach Rao, and his story is out there at ZaleskiSports.com. Cudahy, East Troy, Edgerton, Greendale, Hartford, Kaukauna, Mayville, Menasha, Merrill, Muskego, Regis, Sheboygan Falls, Southwestern, Sussex Hamilton, St. Croix Central, West Alice Hale, and Regis won the last ones. Pat Bowden, Coach Bowden, announced also over the last few days. I don't know, Steve. That just seems like a lot to me.
Yeah, and I mean, just going through the list that they have, I guess at some of these schools, I didn't realize that they had 3 head coaches. I mean, Sheboygan Falls has 3 head coaches on their former coach list.
All out.
Yeah, and they're all gone. So, 22 on the girls' side, 16 on the boys' side. As you mentioned, only 31 days out, and I'm sure there's obviously coaches have reasons, schools have reasons, and obviously all those won't be out and about. But some very good schools. We talked about the boys' side: Manitowoc Lutheran, New Richmond, Prairie du Chine's usually a good boys' team, and so. Wauwatosa West, so a lot of good schools looking for new head coaches, and a lot of those are right there in the school already, as you mentioned. Assistant coaches looking to step up, so it's going to be interesting to see. Obviously, they all have to get filled at some point, so we'll keep our eye on that and let you all know about what if there are more to come. Then we'll. Let you know about former coaches and see what we got for new coaches coming up.
Steve mentioned a couple of them. Boys, high schools now looking for new coaches. One's already been found. Anago, Deerfield, Hillsboro, Holman, Kettle Moraine, Manitowoc Lutheran, Mayville, New Richmond, Prairie du Chien, St. Lutheran Seminary, Siren, Southern Door, Verona, Waterford, Waukesha North, and Tosa West, as Steve mentioned. A couple of those. Manitowoc Lutheran already made a hire, though. Gordy Zastro has resigned, and Scott Lohberger in as a new coach. I should mention in girls basketball, there's already been 3 new coaches hired. Birchwood has said goodbye to Greg Hayes. Casey Rurup was the interim coach, and now Coach Rurup is how that one worked out. East Troy, that was one of the there's a lot of coaches there. Mariah Lohman, Jarrett Church, Kristen Mikulski, and Ryan Vodnik was the interim. And then Stacy Butala won the sweepstakes there. Coach Butala now over in East Troy. And in Edgerton, Mike Schmidt was the coach, and now Chris Jenny. So that's also interesting, too, in this time of no sports, to be able to hire a new coach in that time. Now, as Steve alluded to a little bit, some of those may have already kind of been figured out during the season. As the season started, word internally, hey, this is my last year, and maybe this should be our coach next year.
Well, and that's what you see with Coach Rurup at Birchwood.
Yeah.
I mean, the interim, then they had Casey come in, and now as the head coach. So. And a lot of these, as you mentioned, might have said, this is going to be my last year. Let's get this interim in. Let's get this assistant coach ready to take over a head coaching job. And a lot of these, I don't have brackets in front of me, but as you mentioned, 31 days out from the state tournament for the girls. Edgerton, Birchwood, and East Troy might have been out first
Even
round,
further.
second round. And so they might have made their decision pretty early on and got that all figured out right as all this had started going down. So.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So one more quick note about high school sports. A couple notes, I guess. High school sports in the state of Wisconsin. One is, so all spring sports are still postponed, in the postponed category, not the cancel category, and we're going to talk about that here momentarily, so stay tuned, don't turn the channel yet. And again, you're listening on 1320 AM WFHR, 1450 AM WDLB, and listening and watching online on Facebook at Zaleski Sports. Hi there. So the one update is that for the spring sports that would have had their championships somewhere on a University of Wisconsin campus location, which is quite a few of them, those won't happen there. Such was the case for boys basketball. If you remember, in the days leading up, the campus started closing, and the Kohl Center was out. There was some talk that perhaps they would play at multiple locations around the state because you didn't have an attendance requirement anymore. So you could play in the smallest of gyms. You'd probably play in somebody's backyard at that point, and that would have been acceptable. So the campus remains closed even further so than it was back on March 11th and 12th and that time frame. So if softball, baseball, whatever it may be that was scheduled to be held in a University of Wisconsin location, they will now need a new location, and I'll offer up my backyard, see if they want to come and play there. So some changes there are already made official as far as what would happen if those sports were to take place. And I'll say again for the last time, probably, we are hanging by a thread. I'd say we are likely, if we're going to put this in a percent way, we're likely more percent canceled than postponed right now. And it's kind of funny, Steve, we talked about it last week, too, that the weather this year is perfect, pristine compared to every other year, except for now. Got a bunch of snow last night that would have postponed games probably for the week, this week, should spring sports have happened, which is completely normal. I have often called spring sports postponement season, because that's what it is. And so we're in a postponement season right now. The Board of Control is meeting next week on Tuesday, that's April 21st, where I believe, this is just me, but I believe that's where a decision will be made, and we'll just hold out hope. Hey, we're hanging on by a thread, folks. We're hanging on by a thread, but if you've got any friends on the Board of Control, now's the time to send them a letter, a note, a message, a telegraph, a pigeon, or whatever, and tell them, please, see if there's a way. There's a lot of talk nationally about other stuff that we'll leave for a political show, about a lot of energy around May 1st right now. What could happen on May 1st? What could be open on May 1st? And that's just talk right now for those things. And those things are, as much as I hate to admit it, real life stuff. And we've been put in our place here during the quarantine as sports not being the best number one thing that's on people's minds, and I don't like those people. So, but that's what we're being told, that sports does not rule the world, and I've refused to accept that fact. So, but if these other things happen, and there's some news that comes out this week about these kind of businesses maybe could open by, the first week in May, and these things could, that's what all the Board of Control will be looking to find out. What in the real world is allowed to happen besides right now going through the drive-through, going to the grocery store, those kind of things. I'll just real briefly say you can have hundreds of people in a grocery store, but you can't have 30 people at a baseball field. I don't get it, but here I am on a sports show, so maybe I'm not supposed to get it. So that's what's coming on April 21st. Something else that's also coming is perhaps baseball and basketball, NBA, Major League Baseball, National Basketball Association. That is perhaps what's happening as now talk really starting to gather up steam about this. What I've heard the most of, so there are these casinos in Las Vegas that have basketball arenas inside of them, and then hotels and all the gambling machines that are completely shut off. You can't go to a casino you can go to the hotel room, but you can't go in the actual casino right now. So anyway, the idea for the NBA, one of the ones that seems to be most prevalent, and that's leading the way, is that one or two of these casino hotels would be leased out to the association. All the players from the whole league would stay in them. They'd be quarantined inside of them, and then they would play a series of games each day until they get through the end of the season, the playoffs. So you'd have a game at noon, a game at 3, a game at 8, whatever the case, at two different places, get through the season that way. And then Major League Baseball is kind of talking about the same thing. Maybe let's just pick, maybe one city here in this state and one city here, and then every game just gets played there. So that's kind of the talk, Steve. I don't know I don't know when we're going to find out yet, but that's what they're talking about.
Yeah, and that was something that, as you mentioned, that the last couple of days has really gotten some steam behind it. Brian Windhorst from ESPN has mentioned that the NBA would need 25 days to get ready for the season to come back. Major League Baseball has mentioned that they need a couple of weeks to get their pitchers and players ready to, if they have to head down to Arizona or Florida to play these games. And then there was talk that they would play not in their divisions, or not in, like the Brewers wouldn't play in the NL Central. They would play teams that are with them in the Cactus League in Arizona. So that would put another wrinkle in it. But a lot of these people just want to get out there and play. I mean, obviously, they're professional athletes that have been cooped up in their house themselves, that want to just get out there and get stuff figured out. So it's going to be interesting to see what the next couple of weeks have to offer. As you mentioned, the WIAA has their meeting on the 21st. I'm sure they'll be talking with the governor. I'm sure they'll be talking with the National Federation of High School Sports because the stay-at-home or the order right now is to the 30th, and so once that, or April 30th, and so once they get their board of directors thing figured out, and then they talk to the governor, that'll probably figure out what needs to happen there. But everybody is just dying for live sports right now. I mean, it's and you mentioned earlier on before we went on, UFC, Major League Baseball, NBA, about figuring out where they can play, what they need to do. And so it'll be interesting, especially if they end up playing in spring training facilities, how that would work with television rights and radio and all that stuff. So we're just holding out hope right now. And so we're hoping that something happens, especially this year. The Bucks were a team that could finally get back to an NBA Finals and win an NBA Finals. And so it's just tough for obviously everybody, but especially fans of teams that were good, especially like the Bucks and the Lakers again this year. So we'll see what ends up happening.
Word early on is Giannis was having trouble finding a basketball hoop. I don't know if he's been able to remedy that situation, but tough to stay in shape. And that's why you said they're going to need a number of weeks to get back into the groove of things, because they've been out for a month now, probably hanging around. We've seen some of them on the video game machines and doing other stuff. But there's a lot of ad dollars aside from just the activity that can help sway. It does help push decision-making. Money talks. We've heard that a lot over the course of our lives, and money does talk, and it's talking a lot right now. The UFC, Dana White, is that the guy's name? I don't do the UFC, but I know what it is. He's talking about buying or renting an island. You talk about, money. Buying an island so you can continue on your sport, but that tells you how much money is at stake on the other side of it. And if you're able to buy an island, well, certainly there's enough money coming in on the front end to make that happen. So everybody's pushing to get something looking like sports back on. One thing that is still on is the NFL draft. We are T-minus 10 days for the NFL draft to happen, and it seems like they have got their planning all figured out as far as that's going to happen. The commissioner is going to be in his basement, which it's kind of funny. You think about that. He'll be in his basement announcing the picks as they come in. I can't tell you. The number is too great for me to recall all the number of fantasy football drafts I've had in a basement. So that makes sense to me. If you're going to do something like that, do it in your basement. That's where we always did it. And so that's going to happen. And we'll go through. There's not been any movement, Steve, since we've talked here on these free agents. So we're going to skip the free agent talk here today because nothing's changed. The crybaby Cam Newton's still out there. Jadeveon Clowney still looking for a home, and it appears as though it's too close now to the draft. So these guys aren't going to get signed until after the draft. So somebody like maybe the Washington Redskins, the Detroit Lions are going to take Chase Young, a defensive end, in the top 2 or 3 picks in the draft, top 5 for sure, but likely in the top couple, and they'll solve their defensive end, or in their minds anyway, have filled that hole at defensive end with a premier pass rusher like Chase Young from Ohio State. The Bengals are still locked into Joe Burrow, it so appears, quarterback from Louisiana State. And then down the line we go. There could be as many as 4 quarterbacks taken in the first round. Now, that has happened before, but it is fairly rare for that to happen. But that has happened before. Of course, Tua is out there. He's still a top 10 pick coming off a knee injury, and I would think that's a risk when you're kind of looking at things. Again, we're going to skim here just a little bit. DeAndre Swift, a running back, appears to be the only, or one of, maybe just the only running back that would be taken in the first round, as, again, running backs in the NFL devalued with passing rules changes over the last decade and those kind of things. But, Steve, we'll kind of turn to the Green Bay Packers here, and they pick at number 30. An offensive line. There's been some offensive line movement for the Packers. Maybe a linebacker, although they did sign one in the early free agent period. But when you're picking 30th, you've got some choices to make there, and you can fill a need at 30 rather than maybe taking a best player available. Maybe at that point you're going to try to find somebody that you like. Historically speaking, pick number 30 has also been a trade spot where somebody from the top end of that second round is going to move up and take somebody ahead of the 49ers and the Chiefs this year. And then the Packers, maybe if their trade were to happen, get an extra couple picks later on.
Yeah, and the Packers don't have a whole lot of draft picks this year, as many as they've had in the past. And that's one thing, as a lot of Packer fans have and realize how spoiled the Packers have been the last 25 years or whenever since Brett Favre came, that we've only needed, I guess, 2 Hall of Fame quarterbacks. And picking at the bottom of the draft spells bad things sometimes, because being as good as the Packers have been the last 20 years, they don't get high draft picks. They don't have the opportunity to go after a Chase Young or a Tua or somebody above or at that level. Jared Jeudy was a player that the Packers were looking at, wide receiver from Alabama. And so there's been a lot of talk about the Packers possibly taking Justin Herbert, quarterback, and in the first round. That would be a big thing, especially that Aaron Rodgers said that he wants to play past 40 years old. He sat behind Brett Favre for 3 years, which helped him. So we'll see. But the big one right now that a lot of Packer fans want is a wide receiver. I mean, just a showcase wide receiver that can go out and get the ball. I mean, we've had some wide receivers that have really tanked, haven't been very good. So just a big play, fast wide receiver would be ideal for the Packers. And like you said, we'll see what Brian Gutekunst will want to do with the trade. I think he did it a couple years ago. It's only his second or third draft now since Ted Thompson left, and he's done fairly well in the draft and with free agency. So we'll see what the Packers front office wants to do with their pick. And just going through, as you mentioned, Joe Burrow. The one thing that I'm really looking forward to is Roger Goodell trying to pronounce Tua's last name, because he has issues beyond compare with names that he can't pronounce. So Tua will be fun to listen to, see what Commissioner Goodell how bad he'll butcher Tua's last name.
Yeah, Commissioner, Tennessee Titan quarterback, former now, Marcus Mariota, is how he let that one loose, and now he's by himself. Yeah. He's in his basement by himself, and nobody there to help him. He's got when the draft happened on the stage, the card would be handed in, and he'd have somebody behind the stage kind of helping him out a little bit, and it's such a lot to know, and you walk back out there and you mangle it anyway. Now he's got nobody to help him though. So it's going to be a free-for-all, and it's going to be must-see TV for a lot of reasons. Interesting other note about the draft as we bring today's show in for a landing is this would be the week, and last week too, but especially this week, where these draft prospects, they are flying around the country to all these teams, meeting with people. Their agents are even flying around faster, creating a hubbub and creating, getting teams in a lather for a certain player, and you see teams moving up and down the draft boards. Not the case this year. Nobody's flying anywhere. We've got an exciting week next week of former, current, and future NFL players all coming up on the Zaleski Sports Network, and the ones we've talked to, they're going nowhere, and we know that. And so that'll be the other interesting part of this draft is, I think for the first time since before the internet, the draft is going to kind of go according to just football minds. Yeah. There aren't any agents to work up a team into a lather about their player, because the agents are also stuck inside their house. And so it's just interesting how it's all going to go. But again, we will bring today's show in for a landing. Thank you all for listening. We've got a big NFL draft show coming up next week, and you can find out more about Zaleski Sports at zaleskisports.com and the Facebook Zaleski Sports Network. Have a great week, everybody. Go Sports.